Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, Form 3s. Welcome back to another session of English language. If I'm correct, it should be our fourth meeting since we started. And just as a recap, in the first time we met, we did a summary. The second time, we answered a question on functional writing having to do with a recipe. Then last week, remember, we had some grammar. We did modals, modal auxiliaries or modal verbs. Then in the same week, Mr. Liko handled you for composition, section B, gave you some introductory basics. Today, I'm handling, we are back to functional writing. That's what I'll be handling. And as you can see, the topic on our whiteboard here is writing minutes. Minutes is what we're going to do. So this topic is under paper 1A. Paper 1A, as you all know, deals with functional writing, from where the compulsory number shall be taken. The compulsory number shall be taken from section A, 1A, of which minutes writing is a part. So what are minutes? Minutes, in this case, is not a component of time, but it is simply a written document. It is a document which is formal. It is a document that details or records proceedings of a meeting. In other words, it is a document where you record what has transpired or taken place in a meeting. There are so many types of meetings. Like you might have, if you're in a school setting, you might have a staff meeting. You're in the government, you might have a cabinet meeting. As a student, you might have a class meeting or a student leaders meeting, and so many others. So in short, minutes are a brief summary of what is said or what has been discussed in a meeting. And they are written by the secretary. In every meeting, there must be a secretary. He or she is the one who records these minutes. Now, before we go into the details, I wish to state that there are two types of minutes. We have the traditional type, which we are going to emphasize on today. Then the other one is called a tabular. It's called a tabular type. I've said the one we are looking at is called traditional. I just want to say something small about the tabular type, in that the tabular type of minute is a summary of the traditional minutes, which we're going to look at. And it is normally made in table form and it is outlined. But remember, our purpose here is examination purpose. And in examination, we are looking at the details. That is why we want to emphasize the traditional type, which is written in detail form. So next, I would wish to take you through very briefly about the components of the minutes. When you're writing the record of what transpired in a meeting, you are expected to give the title. As usual, I think virtually all our documents in functional writing must have a title. I cannot recall any document that does not have a title in functional writing. Virtually all must have the title, or if you like, you may call it the heading. Two, we have a record of attendance. These are the people who are present and people who are absent in a meeting. The third is the agenda. Agenda is an outline of what that meeting is going to discuss. And lastly, we shall look at these two components of signature and also closure. Who signs? When do they sign? How do they sign? Then the closure. So at the end of the day, these are the components. This topic is functional writing, paper 1A. Now, when it comes to signature and closure, we shall interchange the order a bit. The closure will come before the signature, although I've written it like this here. So now, we are going to scroll to a document I've shared. I hope you can see it on screen. Now in that document, we have what we call, I've given you an example of the title. Where you see number 1, the title. What goes into a title? The title, like many other titles which we have been doing, is a summary of the aspects that you are handling. So in this case, our title is expected to have the name of the group, or you might call it the type of meeting, name of group or type of meeting. What do I mean here? When I talk of the name of a group, it might be, let's say, Senior 4 Candidates Meeting. That is the group. It might be Chibuli SS Staff Meeting. That is the group. It might be Senior 1 German Students Meeting. So that is what we mean by the name of group or organization or type of meeting. The next thing in your heading, it must be the venue. Where does the meeting take place? So name of the group comes first, venue comes next. Inevitably, we shall follow it by the day and date. You mention when was this meeting held, the minutes which you have written, and lastly, the time. So in your document there, you can see, right, follow that order I've said in bold, minutes of the Interact Club. We start with the word minutes. Minutes of the Interact Club meeting. I have named the group. Held in the Freedom Square. I have mentioned the venue. On Saturday, 25th June 2021. I'm giving just an example of the date, it may not be accurate. 25th June 2021. I've given the time 5 p.m. So you can see that when you're writing the title of the minutes, your minutes should have those about 5 components. We talk of the word minutes, it must appear. You talk of the group or the organization or the type of meeting, Interact Club in this case, where it was held, Freedom Square. We have given the day, Saturday. We have given the date, 25th June, and the year, and also the time at which the meeting started. Therefore, from the above example, those are the things that will count towards your marking. When we're marking minutes, we look for all those things in the title. If any one of them is missing, you will be penalized. Minutes of the S3C end of term 2 class meeting held in Senior 3C on 24th August 2021 at 2 p.m. That is just another example. I've already explained what goes there, so I'm not re-emphasizing that. Secondly, we have what we call the register or a record of attendance. Register or record of attendance. That is our number 2. What goes in the register? Here we wish to see members who were present. What do you mean by members present? Like I said, that the minutes are of a group. So each group has its own membership. If it is a staff meeting, we expect that meeting to be attended by the staff. If it is a class meeting, for example, taking the whole of Senior 3s, all members of Senior 3 will be considered to be the members. If it is a meeting of your stream, and your stream is, for example, 3B, the members who will attend that meeting are of 3B. It will not be those of A or C or North or East, etc. So those are the members who will be present, the members of that particular group. And they are the ones that the secretary will have registered. In this section also, you will see that you have to mention members who are absent. Members who are absent with apology. Members who are absent with apology. These are members who are not able to attend the meeting for one reason or another. It's not that they are dodging, but they genuinely cannot attend. And the procedure is that they must inform the people in charge of the meeting of their absence. So once you get that information, then the secretary will record you as being absent with apology. Then in the same section under this membership, we have members who are absent without apology. These are the indisciplined members who are simply dodging, and the secretary will record them as members who are absent without apology. Then lastly, sometimes, I'm emphasizing sometimes but not always, we have what we call members who are in attendance. What does this mean? When the secretary records a few people who are in attendance, it simply means that these are not members of that group, but who were specially invited to attend. Let me give you an example. Supposing your stream has been identified as the most indisciplined stream in Form 3, and you now want to address that disciplinary problem, you might find yourself that it will be chaired by your class teacher, it might be chaired by the class monitor. Now, members of the disciplinary committee, both the prefects and the staff, may not be part of your stream, but you will invite them because their line is discipline. So in that way, they will be in attendance. You might be discussing academics. You find yourself inviting people like maybe the DOS or your dean. So because they are not part of your class, they shall be registered as being present but in attendance. The third component is the agenda. The agenda simply refers to a program. In your minutes, you must list the agenda. This is the program of the things that are going to be discussed. It is a roadmap. In brief, it is a roadmap for what the meeting will involve. And it normally shows the order which you are going to follow. Where are you starting from when the meeting begins, and where are you going to end? This agenda normally is developed by the secretary of the meeting, but he does not or she does not do it alone. Normally, the secretary may approach members of that group and ask them what they feel should be discussed in an upcoming meeting. Then when they agree, he or she consults the chairman or chairperson, and then they agree to put it on the agenda. Then I'm also noting that when you're dealing with agenda, that agenda, like I said, is a brief outline, is a roadmap, but it is that agenda that is a summary, emphasizing it is a summary of the body of your minutes. All documents have the head, they have the body, they have the tail. Our head here is the title, the body is the agenda in details, and then the closure will be the tail, it will be the conclusion. And there's a specific way in which you are going to write these the items in the agenda, or the items of the agenda. We don't simply name it agenda and we walk away. There's a particular way we are going to write, and we shall look at that in due course. Then I talked of closure. I didn't highlight it in an example in this document, but you'll see it in a sample. But let me just talk about it. When we talk of closure, the closure refers to the ending remarks. How do your minutes end? What is the secretary highlighting as the end of the meeting? You make some comment about how the meeting ended, whether it fully ended and we shall wait for another meeting after 1 year or 1 month or 1 week, or whether you simply adjourned and we shall be meeting the following day. Those are the kind of remarks that we put in a closure. Lastly, as part of the format, we have the signatories. Here, the secretary and the chairperson in that order. Secretary and chairperson in that order will have to sign these minutes after members have approved them, that they are a true record of what had been discussed. But just as an explanation, the minutes are not signed at the end of your meeting, but they will have to wait for another meeting of the same group whereby members will now confirm, yes, when we met 2 weeks ago, this is exactly what we discussed and it is what the secretary recorded. Once the members confirm that, then you sign. But they are signed in the next meeting. They are not signed immediately. We are looking at some characteristics of the language. Remember, in writing with formal documents in paper 1, we not only deal with the format, we deal with the content, we also deal with the language. So like I said at the beginning, this is a formal document. And in its being formal, your language must also be formal. This means that we don't expect you to use playful words. We don't expect you to use informal expressions. We expect to read and to see in your minutes things that are accurate or truthful. Of course, your grammar, your spelling, the sentence construction, punctuation must follow those rules which we learn day to day. You are not going to write haphazardly. There will be strict enforcement of grammar, punctuation, spelling, and sentence construction rules. And secondly, when you are writing minutes as the secretary, avoid using the pronoun I. Avoid using the pronoun I. Don't say, I recorded that the chairperson said ABC. There is a particular way you are going to do. One, you are going to use the past tense. Two, it is recommended that the passive voice, be used majorly. Remember, passive voice is where we do not emphasize the speaker, but we give emphasis to the action, to the doer, and we give emphasis to the action and not the doer of the action. For example, I'll give you an example there. Mr. Kalimugabo, it was agreed that Mr. Kalimugabo be suspended indefinitely for his unbecoming behavior. I'm using the passive voice there, and that is an extract from some minutes. Or you can say the opening prayer was led or was said. You can use either of the two words, was led or was said, by Bukenya Shafiq. Another example of passive voice in the past tense, you can say it was unanimously agreed that the new prefect should be sent or be sent for training. So you realize that as you're using the past tense, as you're using the passive voice in writing the minutes, we also have an element of reported speech. So in writing minutes, we expect the student to be very comfortable with those aspects of grammar, aspects like reported speech, passive voice, past tense. So Kibirige is asking whether we have to skip lines before signing. What we should note here is that we said it is a formal document. It is part of composition. And in composition, we are using indented paragraphs where we do not skip lines. So you'll put the element of signature right below your last paragraph. And you say signed, you put the signature, either the calligraphic signature, if I may use that word, or if you cannot do calligraphy, then you sign in small letters. That will be your signature, but no skipping of lines. So let's go back to the sample. We are looking at the sample format. There are two samples there. There's a sample of the minutes in detail, but also have a sample format is where I want to put my emphasis next. So in the format, I've started with the title. We have the word minutes. We say we must have the word minutes. We must give the group or name the association. Here we are naming prefects meeting. When was it held? 12th July. Where? In the library. Time? 8 p.m. 5 aspects handled. Then in that format, the next thing immediately after the heading should be the attendance register. And the first people we are looking at are those we said who are members who are present. You write one name beneath the other up to all members being registered. If you are 20, we should have 20 names. If 100 people attended the meeting, there should be 100. If there are 40, we should have 40 names. And normally, when we are listing these names, it is recommended that the names appear in the order of seniority. What do I mean in order of seniority? It means that the most senior member should appear first. And normally, then they go in that descending order. For example, it might be the head teacher. Okay? Head teacher first, then deputies register next, then other members of staff. The secretary always registers last because he or she registers after all the members have registered. Now, in that sample also, I have a subheading, members absent with apology. Again, you name them. If you have received the apology as secretary or as chairperson, you have to mention to the members attending that so and so requested to be absent. You may give the reason or you may keep the reason confidential. Then, still under the register, the third subheading will be members absent without apology, and those ones too must be named. Then immediately after that, your next subheading will be agenda. And for the agenda, you are going to list it like I have done in that sample. We have prayer. We might have communication from the chairperson. We might have reaction to what the chairperson communicated. We might have to look in this meeting. We might have to look at the minutes of a previous meeting, which you might have sat 2 weeks ago or a month ago, whichever. Now, under that, I want to emphasize that if it is the very first meeting, imagine this is 2022 and you have a new class meeting, we may not have minutes of the previous meeting because we are starting a new thing, a new term. But if within 2022 you have several meetings of the same group, then we can say we need minutes of the previous meeting. In the agenda, we can have matters arising. You may call them reactions if you want. People are reacting now to the minutes. In number 2, they are reacting to what the chairman communicated. But in number 5, they are reacting to what was in the minutes that you are reviewing. And finally, the closure and, of course, signature. So, Nambeja Shamsa, is inquiring whether the title should be in capital letters. My answer here is I recommend it. Put it in capital letters. And just in case you may forget to put in capital letters, make sure that the first letters of each item are in capital, and we make sure that they are underlined. So now that I've answered you, then skipping of lines between the members that are present and those that are absent. We do not skip line. You simply write your subheading on the next line, then you list the names down. We don't skip lines between the present and those that are absent. What will differentiate them are the subheadings. Now, Nkugwa, Imran, you are asking me to explain the agenda again.
Still here, just why is it called a minute?
Nkugwa Imran is asking me to explain about the agenda first. He has asked 2 questions. Let me answer the first. Now, agenda, like we said, is one. It is a brief summary of the items that you are going to discuss in that meeting. That is one. 2, I said the agenda is a roadmap of the meeting. By roadmap, I mean it is the direction you are going to take. What are you going to discuss? You are not there for fun. You are there for serious business. So what are the items on your agenda? What are the major issues that require to be talked about in this meeting? That is what the agenda involves. Then his second question is why is it called minutes? Well, my answer is simple. Nkugwa and others who might have a similar curiosity, I wish to explain that in English language, one word can mean one thing. In other circumstances, one word can mean more than one thing. So our ordinary understanding of minutes, we look at it as an element of time in terms of the hours and the minutes. But here, minute specifically is another word meaning a record. It means a record of what transpires in a meeting. Do we underline the subheading? Sanya Shondra is asking, do you underline the subheading, sorry? Yes, you may underline them. You may bold them, you may underline them. But the only thing that is important is to make sure that they separate the different contents that you are going to write. The subheading should be independent. Okay? You write the subheading, then under that, you write something. If it's agenda, you list the agenda under. If it's members present, list the members present. Don't write them on the same line. Then skipping of lines, this question keeps on coming back. People, let us avoid as much as we can. Let us remember to avoid skipping lines when we are writing official documents. In this case, I will say a straight no. Then Mutesi. Mutesi is asking again, do we skip lines between those that are present and absent? That one I think we have answered. Okay. So let us continue with our format, sample format. So we stopped on agenda. Now, I told you in my introductory remarks that we have a particular way in which you write the minutes in our body. That style which I want to talk about, we call it, you may not write it as a subheading, but you may just be aware that we call it itemization. How do we itemize? So having written your agenda, you have reached the last word in the agenda. We now come to the body. You will write minute. That word must appear. Okay? So if minute one on the agenda was prayer, the next thing you write after minute, write the figure 1 because it is the first item on the agenda. Are you together? Then, for easy follow up, let us assume that this meeting you are talking about, whose agenda we are referring to, was conducted in the month of July, the meeting of that group. You will write that the 07 here is representing the month. And then we give the year. And then we mention what is that item on the agenda. It was prayer. Or if you like, you may write opening prayer. You are not restricted. You may write either of the two. Then here you start explaining who led the prayer. Probably you talk of the chairman calling the meeting to order, then the prayer was said by so and so. It has to be very brief because it's basically dealing with just one simple item. In indented paragraph, then you go to your next minute in your body. You say minute 2, itemized as 07 2021. Item 2 in our sample format is communication from the chairperson. So there you will say communication. You complete communication from the chairperson. Then again in indented paragraph form, the secretary will indicate what the chairman communicated in past tense, in passive voice, in reported speech. Okay? We will not directly quote the chairperson's words. So the rest of the sample format is following that agenda. Okay? The last minute is minute 6, closure. Then we have the signatures. If you are facing the document like I am facing it, the secretary's signature and name and title must be on my left if I am facing the document. But I know if you are looking at it maybe from the point of view of maybe like the board, you will see that it's on your right. But I'm emphasizing that when you're facing the document, secretary signs on the left. So in the signature part, signature comes first. Remember I said if you cannot do it in calligraphic form, then probably use small letters. Never use capital letters for signature in any item that you're writing. Then under the signature, we have the name. It is not name first, then signature. It is signature. It's always signature first, followed by the name. And the name must be in capital letters. Then under the name, you give the title. The title in this case is the secretary. So on the left hand side, it is the details about the secretary. On the right hand side, it is the details about their person. So a brief explanation of those sample format items. I have said one, prayer. A member will be selected by the chairperson to pray before the issues are discussed or before the meeting begins. Usually the chairperson will first call the meeting to order, meaning he'll ask members to be orderly and silent so that the meeting can start. Communication from the chairperson, minute 2, is all about what the leader of that meeting has to say, what he has to propose, what he has to explain. The third item is reaction to the chairperson's communication. After you have carefully listened to the chairperson's communication, all members who are attending the meeting are free to react. They react to that communication, either to thank him, either to seek clarification that there's something that may not be clear, or maybe you may wish to propose another issue different from what the chairman has or chairperson has proposed. All those come under your reactions. The fourth minute is about the review of the previous meeting. This is where the minutes of the last meeting of the same group are brought by the secretary. They are shared with the members. Then you read paragraph by paragraph. And like I said, because you are a member of that group and you might have attended that previous meeting, it is now your duty to ensure that you have understood the minutes of the previous meeting. If they have an error, you let the meeting know. You raise your hand and say, I beg we make a correction on this point. The secretary didn't record it accurately. This is actually what we discussed. That is the moment when corrections will be made before those minutes are signed. So the review of the minutes is the actual reading, paragraph by paragraph, point by point. Then the next minute here, the minute is matters arising. Matters arising, like I said earlier on, refers to your reaction. How are you reacting to the minutes? And whatever you react as a member must be recorded by the secretary. Should show which corrections were made. Then after those minutes are retyped, they are signed and circulated to the members. Lastly, that element of the closure. The closure is the final remark by the chairperson. What does the chairman say as he ends the meeting? What does the chairperson say? We also talk about the closing prayer, and also maybe who said that prayer. Then we shall also emphasize about whether or not there is a need for another meeting. You may name the date. The members will decide that let's have our next meeting on such and such a date. So those are some of the things that may go in the closing remarks. So next, we're going to look at now actually sample of minutes. I'm giving you just one sample. I have titled it Minutes of the Form 3 class meeting held in the main hall. I've mentioned the word minutes, it cannot miss. I've mentioned the group, it is Form 3 class, and the type, it's an academic meeting. I've mentioned the venue, held in the main hall. I've mentioned the day and the date. It was the Thursday, 15th July 2021. Okay. Then the time. I think I've repeated myself there. Main hall will have to delete one item. That's a mistake. 10:30 a.m. is the time. So we are mentioning the word minutes, the group or organization holding the meeting or the type of meeting, then the venue, the day, the date, and the time. Then under that, you've seen I've given my attendance register, members present. I said when listing members present, you start with the seniority. In this case, the chairperson is more senior than all the other members. That is why language you as chairperson is appearing first. We have another 18 members. Then the last member who was present is Nakachwa Bonita, who was the secretary. We say the secretary registers last. Now, in real terms, I said earlier that when you are 100 in a meeting, we must see 100 names. Now here, you know your Form 3 class is very big. You are more than 300. So if all of the Form 3s attend and it's a real meeting and you produce your minutes, I would expect to see all the names of the Form 3 members who attended. But for examination purposes, you will not have time to write each and everybody. And this is why I'm limiting myself. I'm just giving you a sample of 20. You might make 15, you might make it 10, you might make it 20. It's up to you. But make sure you are working within time. I've mentioned 3 names of members who were absent with apology. You have the Sechide, we have Bakahibwa, we have Chiranda. They were absent with apology. Then we have members who are absent without apology. Those ones come next. I've given 2 names. Then now that element I mentioned at the beginning, the element of in attendance. You can see all those people listed. There are 5 of them. None of them is a member of the Form 3 class. And because it's an academic meeting, and academic meetings partially maybe it has an element of discipline, these members were invited. The DOS was invited, the Dean was invited, the matrons and wardens were invited. The head boy was also present. That is why, much as you are now going to argue that you say when you are registering names, let us register in order of seniority. How come you have put the DOS below? The DOS is not a member of this group. He has simply been invited. But in the category in which he has been listed, you can see that he's still the most senior, and therefore that element of seniority is also followed here. I would not put the head boy above the DOS. I hope I'm clear on that. Agenda, I'm not saying anything about that. Now, in the itemization in the body, if you scroll, you can see we have used our conventional paragraphs, indented paragraphs. We have tried to use past tense. We have tried to use reported speech. Under prayer, the meeting was called to order. We are not saying who called it. After which an opening prayer was led. You mention the name of the person who led the prayer and the time. Look at the next item, minute 2, communication of the chairperson. These are the things that the chairperson discussed. Yeah, thanked God that they were alive, that the meeting was able to take place, welcomed the members, probably thanked the members. Then he says what he has to say. He hails the office of the DOS and the staff for their commitment. Maybe the members, she reminds the members that they're in their promotional term and should work hard. And then she wishes everybody happy deliberations, meaning that she wishes everybody good discussions after she has communicated. Then she calls for reactions. So what you see under minute 3 and now the reaction of members. Not everybody reacts. but the secretary will highlight those members who have said something and will try to interpret their words in reported speech, in probably in the passive voice and in past tense. I believe that document will stay in the library after the lesson is ended, so you'll have time to look at it in detail. Then the next item is review of the minutes of the previous meeting. The secretary will state that the minutes were brought, they were read, corrections were made. So in this case, you might have an option of emphasizing a few corrections that were made, but for the sake of being brief, I've just mentioned that corrections are made without giving the details. But in a normal meeting in real life, we shall have to know what corrections were made before we approve them to be the true record. So, ending that, I have said Nakafero Nadia moved that the minutes be adopted as a true record. She was seconded by Pascal Okopa, meaning that before the minutes are approved as a true record, a member has to suggest that yes, we now confirm that this is accurate, it is exact. I'm recommending that we adopt them as a true record. Then Pascal Okopa will say, I am seconding Nakafero, and the secretary will record that. Then the last two items, matters arising. Your reactions to some of what was in the minutes. Those are the reactions we have listed. We have talked about the best 10, so the remainder that the best 10 students will be awarded to the assembly. Then the last 50 students in the SB class will have to do supplementary exams every weekend. The DOS was commended for his dedication. The dean was appreciated the students for their comments in the previous meeting, for their ideas. And then the closure. The chairperson makes the final remarks. She appreciates people for discussing. She appreciates them for their time management and wishes everybody success in the coming exams. Then in the closure, you can also mention, in the closure, you also mention the time the meeting ended. After a closing prayer, you mention the person who led the prayer. In this case, it is Ms. Latifa Kamis. And I've also mentioned the date for the next meeting. It will be on 3rd September 2021 at that time. Then pay emphasis on the signatures. You can see the word signed is there. Under that, we have the signature of the secretary on the left, signature of chairperson on the right. Then their names in capital letters and their titles under their names. Now, another question here from Navatanzi asking whether the notes should be written the way I typed them. It is difficult to type the way the notes should be written. When you are writing, just make sure that you are doing two things. One, the title is in capital. Two, use indented paragraphs, avoid skipping lines. But in this typed document, you see there are some gaps. We have gaps in between sentences because of the setup of the document as you are typing, what we call the line alignment. So at the end of the day, This is just a sample, but for you, I would expect you to write indented paragraphs without using spaces in between or without skipping lines. Then the subheading should be in their proper places. The heading should be in its proper place. It must be capitalized. So we have about 3.5 minutes to end, and I'm definitely coming to the end of this session. I've left you in that document with 2 tasks which you can try out. Number 1, as the secretary of the previous meeting, you write minutes for that meeting. So here I expect you to develop your own agenda. Then in the second one, it's about a village meeting in the area where you stay. The details are given there. Although much as this question is more detailed than the first, it does not cover everything. Still, I would expect you to be creative and also see what goes into the agenda of that meeting. And thank you for the subheading. Actually, is asking whether subheading may be underlined. You may underline it. Remember, I said it must be on its own line. Then under it, you write the detail about it. Then Chibirige, are we copying them in a paper 1 book? I believe you should, because you don't know when you shall come back. So please, if you get that benefit, please copy. You never know what is coming next. So thank you for being good listeners. Remember to stay safe as we await for the head of state to allow us to come back to school.